In Genesis chapter 32, let me break down the basic outline of the chapter. Verses 1 through 3, we see there that Jacob, he is headed to home. He's headed to his brother. And so he sends messengers in front of him to Esau. So there's that piece of the narrative. He wants Esau to know that he's coming. Verses 4 through 6. Boys and girls, this is in your listening guide, this breakdown of the narrative as well. Verses 4 through 6, the messengers that Jacob sends to meet Esau report back with what they've learned. They've met Esau, they've talked to him, and they're reporting that Esau is coming to meet you with 400 men alongside of him. Verses 7 and 8. Jacob was greatly distressed and feared. Verses 9 through 12, Jacob secures a safety plan, remembering that God has promised that he would prevail, that he would succeed as he goes home. Verses 13 through 23, in this breakdown of the narrative here, Jacob sends gifts to his brother, and we see the detail of that laid out in those verses. And then, really kind of the highlight or the emphasis of this particular chapter, verses 24 through 31, is Jacob wrestles a man. Now it's really interesting. The narrator refers to him as a man and as well as an angel. And the narrative also reveals to us this is no mere man, this is no angelic being, this is none other than the Son of God, whom Jacob's ancestors, Abraham and Isaac, they didn't wrestle with this Savior, but they know him as well. So that's the general layout of chapter 32, the outline that sits here. There's also, as we've learned along the way, there's also very important things for us to pay attention to in the meaning of the names. So some of this will be refresher, and obviously we have new names or locations, names of locations that are being introduced here. So let's keep those meaning names intact, because that's even helping tell the narrative, the story. We know the name Esau. We know the meaning of that from when Esau and Jacob were born, and his parents Isaac and Rebekah named him Esau. That name Esau means red. He was apparently, by all descriptions of the Holy Scripture of God, an extraordinarily hairy, hairy child. His skin was red, his hair was red. Seems like a right name. His name's Red. And then we also we learn along the way, as Esau leaves his house as an adult, he moves and begins to develop a segment or a part of the world known as the Edomites. These would be the descendants of Esau. The word Edom should not surprise you. Means red. So Esau, the red child, settles a people from his line known as the Reds. So red has a lot of reds. And then we're reminded, obviously we know of Jacob along the way. He's the main character of the interaction between God and man. We know the name Jacob. It means supplanter. And so he gets this name, you remember, from out of the womb, he's holding on to his brother's heel. And so he's named Jacob, the supplanter, the one who's wanting to get ahead. He doesn't want to be left behind, the supplanter. And then we're also going to learn here that Jacob will receive a new name. He'll be given a new name. Just like Esau will be carrying the name of the Edomites moving forward, the same will be true here of Jacob. However, here the name Israel literally means he who strives with God. It's really a fascinating name that God gives to him. Now, it seems fitting because that's the name that he gives to him after an all-night wrestling match. He who strives or fights with God. And then he's given, Jacob will name this place Peniel. You'll also see the spelling of this, depending upon in your English translations, both Peniel and Penuel. Both of these are referring to the same place and have the same meaning attached to them, and that is the face of God. So, the supplanter has left his uncle Laban previous to this, and he's come now to the place where that he names another place, Menanium, and this literally means to us in our English-speaking words, it means the two camps or the two companies. And why is it named this? Because Jacob is met by two companies of angels, by angelic beings, and there they are. So this is the two camps. This is where Jacob is literally saying, here's the place where I met the angelic beings. Now, this is not the first time Jacob has ever had an encounter with angelic beings. You remember as he's leaving home on his way to Laban, he comes to a place that he names Bethel, which is the gate of heaven. And at Bethel, there's where Jacob, in a dream, sees these angelic beings coming up and down a ladder from heaven. And at the top of that ladder is the Son of Man, the Son of God, Jesus, the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ. So Jacob has, this will be a second experience, divided by about 20 plus years, but in that rough area of about 20 years. Similar in location, similar encounters. And so the story is by name is being told here that the supplanter is meeting with Red, and the supplanter is camped out over here at the two camps. The supplanter will send messengers on to Red. This is just the name, the narrative being told just by the names. The supplanter sends messengers to Red. Red finds a bunch of people to come with him. What is it? He finds how many people? I've lost myself completely in my note here. How many does he have? 400? 400 other men with him. So Red sends 400 Edomites. He sends 400 Reds with him. So Jacob is not just going to meet up with one Red. He's going to meet up with 401 Reds. And so while all that's happening, the dialogue, the gifts have been sent from the supplanter to the Reds, that in that night, before the meeting, Jacob will wrestle. Now it's nighttime. He will wrestle through the night after he securely gives safety to his family. He wrestles all night. And then when the fight is over and the break of day, he calls that place the face of God. Tells us a little bit what he's acknowledging, what he's seeing, what he's experiencing, and we'll see that as we proceed through the text. So this chapter has essentially two parts to it. So this is background, historic connections. The first part is the plan that Jacob has in meeting with Esau. The second part is Jacob wrestling with God. We're just going to go ahead and call this what it is. The narrator, Moses, is telling us this is a man, but he will disclose this is no mere man, this is no simple encounter, this is no angelic being, this really is the face of God. Jacob is wrestling with God. So the first part is the plan to meet with Esau. The second half of the text or the chapter is Jacob wrestling with God. So the last time, just to kind of catch us all up to speed, the last time we heard of Esau and Jacob, these brothers, these twin brothers in their relationship, the last time we saw them, Jacob was fleeing for his life. You remember that Jacob had tricked, he had supplanted the blessing, even though it was rightfully his, because Esau had already sold his birthright to his brother, but Esau was in the process of receiving the blessing from the father to the oldest child at the time that Jacob comes in, and for every practical purposes, he's stealing or he's taking this blessing. Now, he's really not technically, because he is in the seat of the birthright holder, that he should receive the blessing. But it is received in the brotherly conflict as you stole it from me. You robbed me of the blessing from my father. And so the word spread through the household that Esau is intending to murder his brother Jacob because he did this. So Rebekah tells Jacob, Rebekah and Isaac, actually we know from the narrative, both of them are involved in pleading with Jacob to leave and go to Laban, go to this family. That essentially you're going to Rebekah's family, her household, her brother, your uncle. So the last time that we saw these two together, Esau was maybe a little bit of pun intended. He was red, hot, mad. Isn't it interesting that the color red gets attached to the emotion of anger, and Esau is red, so it's red hot. Yeah, I know. Well, move along. All the pun is intended and not intended. There, it just is, right? So he's so mad that he wants his brother, his own blood relative, his own closest brother. He wants him dead. So Jacob wants to see his brother. It's been over 20 years. Jacob now has a whole household of children. So Jacob wants to see his brother. He naturally with concern, he's not sure, does Esau still want to kill me? And so when the messengers come back with the report, Esau's on his way with 400 people. Seems like a pretty natural response that Jacob would have some distress upon him. Wait a minute, Esau. We just need to talk for a minute. Well, Jacob then devises this plan, and this based upon the promise that he's received from God, that God's going to prosper him, he's going to bless him. And so Jacob is just being sure that Esau cannot supplant God's plan. So Jacob divides the family into groups. And then ultimately, what does he do? He isolates himself. So Jacob sends gifts ahead. And these gifts that go, so he's divided his camp into 2 camps. And then he divides the gifts into 3 waves. And a total of 580 creatures that Jacob is sending to his brother Esau. These gifts include camels, goats, cows, and donkeys. So he's sending them out in 3 waves, 580 in total. All of these represent things that would be of benefit to Esau. So Jacob's he's not sending him. He didn't go out in the garage and find everything that he wanted to send to the landfill and say, well, let's send this on to Esau. What am I going to do with it? He's choosing select and valuable goods to send on to his brother as gifts. Not as a bribe, but as gifts. And there's a difference in the two. The Holy Scripture is telling us these are gifts. And so we should think of them as gifts. That's the intention of Jacob's heart. He wants to gift his brother with valuable goods that God has blessed him with in these last 20 years. Goats. Now some of you have goats, and you know there's value in goats. I don't know of anyone who has camels. If you do, you've been holding out on me. I want to be there occasionally. Now I've had these very specifically. The text points out that these were milking camels. These were camels that were being milked and should continue to be milked. I don't know. I know it's not a marketable thing here, but have you ever had camel's milk? I have, and I honestly don't know why it's marketable. But it's a valuable thing. It's got a lot of nutrients and proteins in it Apparently it's really good to those who really like it. I know there's a couple of you in here that have had, or I think you've had camel milk, haven't you, Renee? I thought you were with me that time that I could barely swallow that glass of freshly, you've drank warm cow's milk, haven't you, or warm goat milk? Imagine for a minute, and then I will promise to move along. Imagine drinking warm camel's milk. Okay, well, I should just leave that. I don't know, Silas is out greeting or such, but I think Silas has had camel's milk as well. I know we have some ranchers among us, so we know these are valuable. Cows are quite a market. They're around here, in the milking industry and in the ranching industry, the cows are big. They're cash cows, right? No. Okay, a little bit of pun intended every time I say no pun intended, but they are. But donkeys keep showing up as valuable creatures. I told the elders last Sunday night, if I were about 30 years younger, I would really push Renee for me to have a donkey. Not to ride to work on. I'm not interested in being that archaic. But the Bible obviously puts a lot of interesting emphasis upon donkeys. They really are a burden of beasts, the Bible will even call them. But how many times do you hear in the narrative a donkey plays a pretty significant part of the narrative? And here they do as well. So there's goats, there's camels, there's cows, and there's donkeys included in the gifts. And these gifts are divided into 3 waves. So Esau will receive the first and he'll think, well, that's kind. And then he'll receive the second, and the intention is, well, that's impressive. And then the third wave of these is, oh my goodness, there's something really generous about this brother I want to kill or used to want to kill. We learn something, and so we do this along the way in these kinds of narratives. We stop and we say, there's something worth stopping and looking at here. This is a biblical principle of being generous and kind. These are attributes that are markers on born-again believers. We are, by nature, not our old nature. Our old nature is stingy and selfish. And I know you've met some unbelievers who are pretty generous as well, but we're just going to recognize that for a person to be naturally kind with their possessions is a Christian attribute. Jacob is exercising this, and it's really even kind of serving as a bit of an example for us. Matter of fact, in Ecclesiastes chapter 10, we see that Solomon acknowledges that some gifts that would otherwise be considered good and valuable can be ruined with certain other things given with it. And he says in Ecclesiastes chapter 10 that flies make, this is me summarizing this, flies make everything stink. And they do, don't they? You send along, Solomon is saying, hey, you send along valuable perfume, and the perfume has a collection of flies with it. The perfume is now, so I don't want that. Look at all those flies, the dead flies that are in the perfume. What kind of gift is that? God's wanting us to see something, that there is a nature about Christians that when we are generous, we are generous. And we give things of value. And this would be a reflection of what God did. God gave something of value. He gave us His only begotten Son. And He didn't send some guy that He found in an alley somewhere and said, well, he'll do. He stinks like flies. He stinks worse. The flies go with Him everywhere. God sent His only begotten Son. He sends valuables. He sends a valuable gift to us. So we should see that in the narrative. This isn't just, well, that's an interesting thing to insert there. This is actually the language of the gospel all along the way. So God is telling us the gospel narrative in this story. He's sending all of these valuable things. Goats, camels, cows, donkeys. Esau will be receiving them with awe. can you believe this? Verses 22 and 23 really kind of stand as an intermission between part 1 and part 2 of the chapter. Verses 22 and 23. So all the camp's been divided into two. The waves of the gifts have already been sent out. So verse 22, now this is Jacob, he arose that same night and took his 2 wives and his 2 maids and his 11 children. Not all of his children have been born yet. There's still children to be born back at home. And they crossed the ford of the Jabbok. And he took his family, and he sent them across the stream and sent across whatever he had. So he's put all of his valuables. He's separated himself from all of his valuables. So he's sending gifts. He's divided. So this is a strategic. If Esau attacks this camp, I still have this camp. We still have this enterprise if he destroys this one. And then he moves his family into a more secure place. Takes all of his household and all of his valuables, and there they are on the other side of the stream. So this is the intermission. Verse 23, then he took them and sent them across the stream, and he sent across whatever he had. Then, so verse 24, so the intermission's over. Then Jacob was left alone. It's all by himself now. All of his enterprise, all of his family, and all of his wealth, valuables. This is like when he shows up at at the well when he meets Rachel. And Laban, Jacob has nothing. And God will bless him. God will give him great success. So Jacob was left alone. And so then the narrative, keep this in mind. We believe Moses is the narrator. He's the one telling the narrative story to the people of Israel, Jacob's descendants, saying that he wrestled with a man. Now, it's interesting that why doesn't Moses just go ahead and acknowledge this is the Son of God? It seems as though this would be the natural conclusion that anyone who knows this narrative would know this. But keep this in mind. Moses knows the art of telling a story. He's keeping interest. He's keeping tension here. Who's this mysterious wrestler? Now that doesn't mean he's a masked wrestler, as you would suppose in a modern wrestling match would be. We just don't know at this point. He's gone by himself, and the next thing we know, he's hand-to-hand wrestling. And they are engaged in this wrestling match until daybreak. So there's this nocturnal wrestling match between Jacob and at this point this unknown individual. So keep this in mind. Jacob, at this wrestling match, we have Jacob, the supplanter. And he's wrestling, we'll call him the avenging man. We'll sit here at this point in the narrative. I've already made the conclusion. I think the text makes the conclusion. This is clearly the Son of God. But the avenging man at this point in verse 24, no. Or verse 24, we don't know. Is he a man? Is he angel? Is he deity? Well, Scripture actually will reveal that to us in the flow of this narrative. But also the prophet Hosea. By the way, Hosea will very clearly describe this in Hosea chapter 12, verses 3 through 5. You should make note of that and go read that. Hosea 12, Hosea tells us that Jacob wrestled with the Son of God. There's no mistaking what Hosea is reporting there. And he's standing as an authoritative voice, reflecting back to the event as he's addressing the condition of the nation of Israel. Remember, Israel means striving with God. And what is the nation of Israel doing in the day of Hosea but striving with God? Jacob is engaged in striving with God. The nation is involved in striving with God. Again, the story is telling a glorious story, isn't it? So we learn that this opponent of Jacob, and it appears as though Jacob is the one who's initiating the wrestling, is none other than the Son of God Himself. Hey, listen, we even learned this from Job. By the way, this is a very interesting thing that we learn from Job in Job 23, verse 6. Would He contend with me by the greatness of His power? So this is a two-line verse. Would God contend with me by the greatness of His power? We even learn from Job that there's something we can appreciate about what's happening between Jacob and this man, or even, if you want, call him an angel. Between Jacob and this angel, there's a contending. We learn that this is the Son of God Himself, but we'll learn that there's a mercy that God is employing, is that the Son of Man doesn't just knock him over by His own presence. We know that the power of God can do that. Remember when Jesus is in the garden and the whole fleet of the Roman Empire, not the entire empire, but this fleet of army soldiers are there, and they're all kind of essentially pushed back just by the very presence of God. Jesus Himself has this kind of miraculous power, and what a kindness of God that God Himself didn't just do away with Jacob and say, I'm done with this, and we've got enough descendants to move along, and I'm still keeping my covenant with you. I'm not breaking any of this. But God Himself wrestling with Jacob, we learn this from Job, that Job is essentially telling us it is a kindness of God that when God contends with us, He does it in strength that doesn't kill us. Think with your gospel ears again. Always. Never stop thinking with your gospel ears. Should God contend with man in His power? If He does, no man can live. So God contends with man in mercy. It would otherwise leave us in a very perplexed situation. As how is it possible for Jacob to contend so long with the Son of God? Because God's not contending with him in His power. He's contending with Jacob in Jacob's human power. It's a mercy. It gives attention to the glory of God, and it shows us that God has the intentions of man's good involved. So Jacob will end this. This is actually a fantastic wrestling match. Jacob is obviously very strong to contend for, we don't know how long, but he contends with him until daybreak. And when the wrestling match is over, there's a little bit of an exchange of who are you and who are you? Welcome to meet you. Good to know who I've been wrestling with all night. Jacob identifies himself, but this man or this angel has not introduced who he is yet. But yet, Jacob recognizes that this one that he's been wrestling with has the capacity to bless him. So that puts this one that he's wrestling with through the narrative, even right here, that this is deity, because man doesn't look for another man, his fellow man, to bless him like this, or to fulfill the promise that God gave to Jacob that He will bless his whole household with numerous offspring, so many that you can't even count them. You wouldn't ask that of another man, you would only ask that of God. So Jacob is expressing an acknowledgement of this person, of this individual that he's been wrestling with, is no mere man, nor is he a messenger of God. He's none other than God Himself, the Son of God, the one in whom Abraham put his faith in, the one in whom Isaac put his faith in when Isaac took Jacob, when Abraham took Isaac to be sacrificed, and God provides another sacrifice. Isaac lives his days knowing the kindness and the mercy of God. He teaches this to his twin sons. And now Jacob. What is he doing here but experiencing the glory of God? God hasn't just completely done away with me. Now it is of interest, isn't it, when this wrestling match is over, that this individual who's been wrestling with Jacob, you almost get the idea that he just kind of reaches out and touches his hip. Which again should speak to this power, this reserved power that this wrestler is wrestling with. He could have ended this wrestling match before it even began. But after Jacob has contended with this man all night long, he reaches over and touches his hip. And Jacob limps the rest of his life. As a memorial of this wrestling match, the people of God, this is not a law of God, it is a beautiful memorial that's being reflected here. So what should we do about when God establishes a desire for memorials? We should say, well, this is that interesting. The nation of Israel, from this day forward to the time of the writer, this would be Moses. Notice, and they carry this on even beyond Moses. There's many, even in the modern world, who still refuse to eat this particular part of the goats or the camels, the cows, the donkeys. I don't know that they eat donkeys. Don't go out and tell anybody I said they eat donkeys. I don't know if they do that. I know they eat camels because I've eaten a camel. I should have stopped a long time ago. A camel is an unclean creature. They don't eat camels, but people in the known world eat camels. I'm one of those. Okay. We see in here that there's this kindness of God. That the sons of Israel are going to memorialize this event by never eating that which touched the socket of the thigh of those creatures that they eat. Now, it's not a law. It's not required for salvation. But it is a memorial. Isn't that of interest? I mean, it is to me. It's good for us to remember struggles we've had in life, isn't it? And we don't worship them, but we learn a lot from them, don't we? I know I have. I've learned a lot from the struggles I've contended with God in. Some of them have left a mark. Some of them are physical or spiritual or mental, but they leave a mark, don't they? This is what it's like when we have a holy God. He's kind to give us memorials. Now, there's another memorial. We're about to observe it even this morning. It's not a law. You don't have to do this to be saved. Nobody's contending or arguing for that. But we're going to come to a table to remember the kindness of God. And this is what this memorial would have been. This memorial not set up by God, but listen, it's permittable that men would set up memorials to remember these things. God has set up a memorial for us, though. And in this memorial, what are we to do but to remember and to proclaim the Lord's death? We are essentially agreeing that God has contended with us in the need that we had, not according to His strength. However, it will include His strength. All of that's true inside of this. We can get too lost into the nitty-gritties of getting lost in the narrative story. But God is contending with us as Job describes. He's contending us not in His strength, but He contends for us by sending His only begotten Son to do for us what we could not do. Now, that's pretty strong. God could have come and dealt with us in His strength and just wiped us out. All of humanity. It could have all been done in one quick moment. He wouldn't have even had to touch anybody's thigh to be done with it. It just would have been done. So God contended with humanity according to man's need. And that is that God would be glorified. There's no way that Christ comes and saves us that God doesn't get the glory for it. You can't come to the conclusion of Genesis chapter 32 and conclude anything other than God has been glorified. Jacob will name this place where this wrestling match took place. He'll name this place the face of God. This is the place where I saw God. Think of this. Moses wanted to see God. God wouldn't permit it. The only way that Jacob could have seen the face of God and live would be for him to see the Son of God, Jesus, and live. This is the gospel. This is the telling of the gospel from this Old Testament real narrative of an encounter and an event in real people's lives. God's telling a story. And He concludes the story with a pointing toward a memorial that our Lord commanded us to participate in. The eating at His table, the drinking at His table. We do it as a memorial, not because it saves us. We've well argued that one. We know that it doesn't. This bread never turns into the physical flesh of Jesus. This is a well argued point from Scripture. The blood is never, or the wine is never, it never turns into the blood of Christ. It's a memorial. It's a reminder. And when we come to this table, we're not coming to this table and we're talking about this Jesus as though He's not here. We're coming to this table because He's currently present with us, even right now. He's inviting us to His table of memory. Do you remember what you were like before Christ rescued you? It would have been right for God to have been to completely do away with you. But He acted towards you with mercy, didn't He? And He invites you to come to the memorial and to make that proclamation again. So that whenever anyone sees the people of God gathering and participating in this memorial, we are telling the story of the gospel again. How many times should we tell the gospel? We should tell the gospel until we have no more breath. So in a few moments, we're going to invite you to examine your heart. This is one of the things that the New Testament instructs us. This is how you should come to this memorial table. You should examine your hearts. So we'll turn to the house of God here, who have gathered this morning, and we're going to ask you, we're going to instruct you. We should do this the way God tells us to do this. And so we should examine our hearts. And then when we're done examining our hearts and we see the mercy of God, we remember. And we don't limp to this table. Well, maybe some do, but not because of the blood of Christ. We're coming to this table as a redeemed people. A holy people, not on our own righteousness, on the righteousness of the one who contended for us and won the victory, won the battle, and gave us His righteousness. We come to His table and we proclaim this to all who would see. So those who would come to this table are actually speaking and declaring the gospel. Just as those who, when they would sit down at the table, would refuse, they wouldn't even bring the sinew of the hip to the table because it would be telling the story to everybody at the table. God acted with mercy with our father, Jacob, Israel. We'll have more time in the future because this changing of his name from Jacob to Israel shows up again.